things that they have and what we would probably consider normal. And so we've been spending a large part of November and December trying to create some happiness for people, really.
Yes, and you do. We saw an interview with a food bank marketing director in San Francisco, Trish, and he talks about the Silicon Valley paradox. As the economy gets better, we seem to be serving more people. And their client situations come as a surprise. They're often working, but they're forced to make choices between food and clothing and accommodation. There's money coming in, but it's just never enough for everything. We have heard a lot about that. And are you seeing that as well?
Oh, we definitely see that. There's a portion of those that we walk alongside who I would put in our working poor category. They're constantly making choices about which thing they should afford in this particular pay packet.
And that must be, you must see the incredible stress that comes with having to do that.
Absolutely. And the thing that we work really hard at is to try and increase people's capacity. And so whatever skills that we can kind of draw from their kitty, if you like, to help make their life a bit more robust. But sometimes we actually just find that we have to give out food parcels because that's the only way to keep their heads above water while they're doing what they're meant to be doing, which is working their butts off, basically, on a very, very low wage.
How would you increase their capacity? An example of that, maybe?
Sometimes it's a matter of sitting down and actually looking at things. People often come to us, they've tried to manage their way through their budget, and sometimes that means that they've got themselves into debt. So we spend a lot of time trying to work with people who've taken short-term loans with high interests because they won't get a loan from the bank. And so helping them remanage that. Sometimes it's looking at other pieces of their life where we can drip feed things rather than having to pay things in really big lump sums and negotiating with some of the things that crop up. I mean, all you need is to need a warrant of fitness on your car and something's wrong with it, and all of a sudden you've got an extra $500 bill in this particular month, and if we can work with them to negotiate how they might pay that bill over time, or even like dentistry bills for people, things like that, where if we can accumulate, like do it slowly, then it's much more manageable, and sometimes we can actually kind of ease that.
So a lot of what you do is counselling as well as actual material providing.
It's about, we think of it as kind of upskilling people.
Yeah, it sounds like good hard-nosed counselling, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Have you got enough people to help with all of that?
We could always do more. We could always have more capacity. It's as long as a piece of string, really, because as soon as you move from people who are in chronic need, you move into people who are not quite so in chronic need, but are still in need, and that need continues to creep up. And so we're really hard on ourselves. We kind of have a line, this is where we work to, and other agencies work with other people that are maybe not in so much need.
Can I ask you one more thing? We've heard about the cans of chopped tomatoes not being so useful in terms of donations. Can I ask you, from your point of view, if we want to do something to make other people's Christmases better, what is your best suggestion?
Oh, it's quite complicated in that sense, in that it's wonderful when people give, and we never would say no to the generosity that people offer us. But our reality is the true work that we do around this time of the year is actually after Christmas, when everyone's gone away and all the fluff and tinsel's down and the real hard yards start to kick in because people have overspent, because people haven't got enough but they've tried. Domestic violence goes up amongst our people, all of those things. So particularly we look at people and say, in your workplace,
Trish,
if you can pull together...
To my shame, I've got to go. I thought I was going up to 5 o'clock today, but it turns out I'm not, and I thank you for the interview. I also thank Jonathan Krebs and Emma Espiner for coming in today.
Thanks, Jim.
Been a pleasure.
I apologise to John Campbell for being late, and I'll hand over to him.
It's all good, G, because it's our last show of the year and we don't mind you running over at all. We will still be here in 15 seconds' time, well, after the news with Katrina, which is at 5 o'clock, so that's not strictly accurate, but we'll be here in, well, about 8 minutes past 5. Thank you for being with us, everyone, for the final checkpoint of 2017.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A resident of Rakotara, north of Kaikoura, says today's reopening of State Highway 1 through the town is a big milestone for the community. The South Island's main transport corridor was devastated by the 7.8 magnitude earthquake a year ago, which caused 10 major slips. Large sections of the highway had to be built from scratch. The road reopened early this afternoon and hundreds of cars have passed the cordon. Ngaio Teua was trapped in Rakotara after the earthquake and says her community has suffered significantly over the past year.
People driving along the road today, they won't know about all the mud and the rain and the slips that came down, and we couldn't get in or out of to our place sometimes. They'll just see a brand new highway today, and that's fantastic. Everybody's been waiting for that to happen all year, and now it's open. It's so great for the town.
Ngaio Teua. Kiwi Rail says the reopening of the section of State Highway 1 is an important step towards restoring the key freight transport links between Auckland and Christchurch, severed by the earthquake. The Royal New Zealand Ballet Company has announced an independent review of its employment processes. It relates to media reports of an exodus of New Zealand dancers from the company. A board member, Isaac Hikaka, says the review will focus on processes for responding to and managing complaints by employees. He told Checkpoint it will also look at how previous complaints were handled. The review will be led by the former Deputy State Services Commissioner Doug Craig and being completed by March next year. The number of people with mumps in Auckland has hit 1,000, with experts saying it now can't be contained without more vaccinations. The latest Auckland Regional Public Health figures show 1,003 people have contracted the disease since it broke out earlier this year. The more people that have the disease, the faster it travels through the community. A senior lecturer in vaccinology at Auckland University, Helen Pertussis-Harris, says once it reaches a certain threshold, it will keep spreading until it runs out of susceptible people.
So the only way at this stage that you can prevent further spread is to reduce your susceptible people, and the only way we can do that is by vaccinating them.
Auckland University vaccinologist Helen Pertussis-Harris. Former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard says the Australian public will not tolerate delays in taking up the recommendations from today's Royal Commission report into child abuse. The Commission's 5-year investigation was set up by Ms Gillard when she was Prime Minister, and its report details how churches, charities and other organisations handled abuse of children across many years. The report says abuse happened in almost every type of institution where children reside or attend. Julia Gillard says she was shocked by the widespread nature of the abuse and attempts to hide it.
The most shocking thing to me has been the breadth of the cover-ups. I knew intellectually that child abuse had happened in institutions because people could have done something, chose to turn a blind eye, but how systematic those cover-ups were was truly shocking to me.
The former Australian Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. 44 dolphins were caught in fishing nets in the Bay of Plenty alone last year, with more than half of them dying, according to figures obtained by Forest and Bird. It's obtained records of the bay's fishing bycatch over the last 7 years from the Ministry for Primary Industries. It includes common dolphins, endangered turtles, fur seals, 600-year-old corals and hundreds of seabirds. The regional manager for Forest and Bird, Dr Rebecca Steinemann, says the dolphins were snared in just 3 separate incidents.
Mostly from the purse seining, so the big net going around, so it would be full pods of mothers and baby dolphins all together. We rely on fishing boats to report these events, but not all of them do, so we don't know the full extent of the problem.
Dr Steinemann says the findings highlight the importance of the planned rollout of cameras and GPS trackers on boats so scientists can see exactly what's going on. It's 5:04. Sport. England have lost 2 early wickets on the 3rd Ashes Test early on the 2nd day at the Wacker in Perth. The tourists started today's session an hour and a half ago on 305 for 4, with century maker David Malan unbeaten on 110. After a slow start, Milan and his partner Johnny Bairstow have started scoring freely. Bairstow reached his first Ashes century but have lost Milan for 139 and Moeen Ali for a duck. England have pushed their first innings total to 372 for 6. They're fighting to claw their way back into the 5-game series after losing the first 2 tests. The New Zealand Breakers are looking to reclaim top spot in the National Basketball League when they play the Adelaide 36ers in Auckland tonight. After recording a 9-game winning streak, the Breakers have lost 3 of their last 4 games, conceding 31 fouls when they lost to Adelaide last weekend. The game marks Kirk Penny's 150th appearance for the Breakers. The former world tennis #1, Leighton Hewitt, plans to come out of retirement and team up with compatriot Sam Grofe in the doubles at next month's Australian Open. 36-year-old Hewitt officially retired from tennis after his home Grand Slam in 2016, but returned to the court twice more last year in Davis Cup and at Wimbledon. And the leading Australian netballer Shani Leighton has withdrawn from the Diamond squad for next year's quad series involving the Silver Ferns as she continues to recover from exhaustion. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life takes to the Australian outback with the nun and registered nurse, Sister Christine Henry, who's spent the past decade helping families in the bush. The Music 101 team presents a mixtape of its favourite Kiwi songs of 2017. And we have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to the heat, given there's been a bit of it about. On Nights, Open the Window with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow from Northland to Whanganui, including Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country and Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, but isolated showers, especially inland, during afternoons and evenings. Manawatu to Wellington, also Wairarapa, fine. Marlborough, Nelson and Canterbury mainly fine, but showers tomorrow afternoon and evening about the ranges, some of which may be heavy with possible thunderstorms. Buller and Westland, isolated showers turning to rain about southern Westland overnight. Otago and Southland, scattered showers today with possible thunderstorms about Southland and Clutha. Long fine spells tomorrow, but a few showers from afternoon, some of which may be heavy and thundery about inland Otago. For Fiordland, periods of rain and the Chatham Islands mainly fine. It's 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Welcome everyone to the final Checkpoint for 2017. We're delighted to have your company. Tonight we go inside Auckland's Sky World, the controversial building with food hall and cinemas that Checkpoint revealed had not had a warrant of fitness for over 470 days and still counting. Also tonight they said it would reopen by Christmas, and it has. State Highway 1 north of Kaikoura. Plus we end with a Christmas treat from 3 very talented men. But we begin tonight with another story we've covered on Checkpoint. What's been called an exodus of dancers from the Royal New Zealand Ballet. The RNZB itself insists things are better there and happier there than the media is reporting. They call recent speculation about their culture and employment practices troubling and unfair. But this afternoon the board announced it had asked former Deputy State Services Commissioner Doug Craig to conduct an independent review of the RNZB's employment processes, in particular its processes for responding to and managing complaints by employees. I spoke to board member lawyer Isaac Hikaka about what they're doing and why.
Well, there are 2 aspects to the announcement today. The first is that the board is cognizant of the issues that have been raised through the media and has asked a former Deputy State Services Commissioner, Mr Doug Craig, to conduct an independent review of the RNZB's employment processes, in particular its processes for responding to and managing complaints by employees. And the second is that the board is undertaking to look at new ways for artists in the company to have a say in the strategic decisions involving the RNZB, and will be seeking the views of dancers and others in the sector about the best way to achieve this. The way we deliver this is still very much open for discussion, but the commitment to give dancers an ongoing opportunity to be heard is serious and will happen.
And the people we've been speaking to over the past few days will be delighted to hear both of these things. If we go back to December of last year, so exactly 12 months ago, an investigation was underway over allegations of conflict between dancers and the artistic director of the Royal New Zealand Ballet. The board had hired a facilitator to mend the relationship. RNZ had learned that 12 dancers and other staff had left the National Ballet Company. 3 or 4 left directly because of the way they were treated by the former artistic director, Francesco Ventriglia. This isn't new, this stuff, is it?
No, these are very much legacy issues as we understand them, as you'd identified. The board, when these were raised at the time strove to deal with those issues properly and believed that the proper processes were appropriate, robust and best practice. But we recognise, given the ongoing interest in and issues raised, that these concerns should be addressed. And so that is why we have commissioned the independent review of the processes adopted.
Okay, have things improved under Patricia Barker?
Yes, we think that under Patricia Barker the company is looking forward to a really bright future, and it's a future that is one that really engages with dancers and one that puts New Zealanders on stage. So I was on the interview panel that interviewed Patricia Barker when she applied for this position, and I can tell you the first thing she raised in the very first interview was about her concern for dancers, dancer safety and dancer support, and she made it clear to the board that dancer pastoral care was a top priority for her, and that aligns with the vision the board has for the Royal New Zealand Ballet as being a place where dancers are supported and all artists in the company and all managers in the company are supported and it's a safe workplace.
Right, well that sounds fantastic. There are 41 photos of dancers on your website currently. How many of them will be with the RNZB this time next year?
I'm not sure of the exact answer to that question, sorry John, because I can't off the top of my head remember.
How many are leaving? How many dancers are leaving, have just left or will leave at some stage during the next year?
I believe the number is 12. I can't, of course, speak about what dancers will be doing next year.
Absolutely. No, fair enough, you can't. And I'm not asking you to crystal ball gaze. So let's restrict ourselves to statement of fact. 12 dancers from 31 are leaving. This is not stability. This is not the lovely stuff you were talking about a minute ago. This seems on the face of it to be the opposite of that.
Well, the board was very concerned about the numbers, and so what we did was we asked for an investigation to be made into how these numbers compare with companies that are similar to the Royal New Zealand Ballet, namely touring ballet companies. And it turns out that these numbers are actually very similar to the level of turnover you would expect from touring companies, because there is quite a unique nature about the Royal New Zealand Ballet, and that is that it tours. It tours across the country because one of its mandates, and it's been part of the goal and vision of the Royal New Zealand Ballet from when it was first formed, was to bring the national company to New Zealanders. And of course that has effects on the ability for dancers and other artistic staff to get comfortable and settled. And so there is a much higher turnover in a touring company than there is in a non-touring company, where all the ballets are performed in the same city, and so there is much greater stability.
Absolutely, and the idea of being a New Zealand company is very important. I've got the strategic plan here. Your mission is very short: to become a compelling expression of New Zealand's creative spirit. Goal number 2, we will be recognised as an inspiring New Zealand brand. So let's go back to those 31 dancers. How many of them are New Zealanders?
I believe the percentage is around 42%.
So less than half.
Or New Zealand.
New Zealanders or New Zealand trained. So,
yes.
Okay, you will be an inspiring New Zealand brand and a compelling expression of New Zealand's creative spirit. Your artistic director is an American. She has hired 2 new ballet masters, both from the same company in America, Grand Rapids Ballet in Michigan. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct, and that is usual in these kind of environments. It's often done in the ballet world, where a new person comes on and brings with them some core support people who they know will be able to deliver the goals that they have for the company, and those goals...
Except the goals, Isaac, are to become a compelling expression of New Zealand's creative spirit. We will be recognised as inspiring a New Zealand brand. I'm not giving you a hard time here, but you get $5 million of taxpayer funding per annum to be the Royal New Zealand Ballet Company. 42% of your dancers are New Zealanders. The top 3 people in terms of the creative management of the company are from the same ballet company in America. Is this at odds with your rhetoric?
Well, 2 points I think I'd address on that, if I may. The first is that one of the goals is to bring that 42% higher, and that's something that Patricia Barker was very strong on in her interviews, and something that has got the strong mandate of the board.
Isaac, so strong that she imported 2 ballet masters from her own company in Michigan.
In terms of the ballet dancers, what we are looking to do is have Patricia Barker, and indeed she is doing this and has done this, she is approaching New Zealand dancers who are dancing overseas and inviting them back to the company. So she is seeking to bring back dancers from overseas back so they can come home and dance in front of New Zealand.
How many has she got so far? How many is she bringing back?
I'm not sure the exact numbers now, but there are certainly ones, and the announcements will be made about those in the future as they come on board. But this is also an ongoing aspect. It is an ongoing goal to bring dancers back from overseas. But also there's an ongoing goal to increase the uptake, if you will, of dancers trained in New Zealand and New Zealand dancers into the Royal New Zealand Ballet at its first instance.
We've been speaking over the past 2 or 3 days, and you are very reassuring, and I'm sure the things you announced at the beginning of the interview really will be welcomed in good faith by everyone who knows and loves the Royal New Zealand Ballet, whether they are people who watch the Royal New Zealand Ballet or whether they are part of the company. But we have been speaking to people, and I just have been having conversations at length with people who are part of the Royal New Zealand Ballet or close to it, and they say it is a very difficult place to be at the moment, and the stability that they had hoped for, because Patricia Barker is the 3rd artistic director in 6 years, has not eventuated.
Well, to address that, the company is very concerned to have a safe workplace, and what we have seen is a lot of messages of support from dancers for Patricia Barker, saying that they have seen a significant improvement under her management. And the impact of the media stories are very high. We have had, only this morning, dancers go in tears, dancers who are currently with the company go in tears to the artistic director because they are concerned about what they see as attacks in the media by the media against the company that they love and love being a part of.
So you are saying that the issues that were behind the complaints against Francesco Ventriglia have been dealt with or are being dealt with, that this is a happier and more stable company that truly reflects the values you talked about at the beginning of this interview?
It is a company, yes, and it's a company that looks to continue to grow in that direction, to continue to have New Zealanders' stories told on stage by New Zealanders, and to bring the ballet to New Zealanders.
Isaac, we would have loved to have spoken to some of your dancers. We would have loved to have heard from anyone who was able to speak about how much they love being at the RNZB and how much it has improved under Patricia Barker. Why were people told not to talk to us? Why were people explicitly told not to talk to the media?
That is a standard practice within most organisations, so that I don't think there's anything unusual about that.
Except it's been reiterated explicitly over the past few days, hasn't it?
I believe it has, because...
So isn't this at odds with the sense that people want to tell us how good it is?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
Well, if you have people coming to Patricia Barker and saying, we love it here, we want people to know how good it is, why aren't they allowed to say that in public?
Well, this is what I'm here doing for you now, John, is relaying those messages.
You are a board member and you have an impressive CV, and a law Masters with First Class Honours, a BA with First Class Honours from Auckland University. You specialise in complex trust litigation, public and administrative law, relationship, property and commercial litigation. You're on the board of the Royal New Zealand Ballet. How many people on the board of the Royal New Zealand Ballet have experience as dancers?
I don't believe any are ex-dancers, not professional dancers. On the board of the Royal New Zealand Ballet is a great wealth of experience in arts management, over I believe 30 years in total of managing a range of arts organisations, including governing on a range of organisations, including the New Zealand School of Dance.
So sorry, but you see, the thing is, you told me you were here speaking on behalf of the dancers. Neither you nor anyone on the board has ever been a dancer. the dancers aren't allowed to talk to us. Doesn't this seem a bit topsy-turvy to you?
Oh, this is why we, as stated right at the beginning of this interview, we are looking at ways to most effectively engage the dancing and artistic voice before the board. And I cannot come on here and say exactly what that's going to look like, because what we want to do is hear from those dancers and those artistic support persons ourselves so that they can tell us what we want. I don't want to prejudge what the best outcome would be.
Where is Patricia Barker at the moment? Is she in the country?
No, she's currently overseas.
Okay.
There are the dancers are on holiday at them.
Yeah, sorry. Didn't you tell me earlier that people were talking to Patricia Barker and saying how upset they were about what was being said about the Royal New Zealand Ballet?
Corresponding with, sorry if I misspoke on that, it was corresponding with, so it's been emails.
Okay, and where are your new ballet masters who are a couple, a married couple, Nicholas Schultz and Laura McQueen Schultz from Grand Rapids Ballet in Michigan? Where are they at the moment?
I believe they're heading to New Zealand and will be with us at the end of December.
At the end of December. So whilst all of this is going on and a board member is fronting, none of the people who are at the top of the heap, as it were, in terms of creative strategy are in the country.
The executive director is in the country. We also have, remember, I think you're missing out, of course, the other ballet mistress we have, who is Clytie Campbell. And Clytie is an example of what we would like to see more of and are aiming as a board to see more of in the Royal New Zealand Ballet. Clytie began her dance
Absolutely.
career.
She's a fine former member of your company, right?
Well, she's still a current member of the company. She is one of the ballet mistresses. And her job was also not openly advertised. She was appointed, and Patricia Barker has been delighted to work with her as part of that senior creative team.
Isaac Hikaka from the Royal New Zealand Ballet Board, the only person who was available to talk to us or allowed to talk to us. We are grateful for his availability. We have heard from lots of people, the Royal New Zealand Ballet, and we will get in touch with those of you who've been in touch with us. Let's return now to a story Checkpoint has covered at length. Fire safety issues at the Skywell building in the middle of Auckland's Queen Street between Aotearoa Square and the iconic Civic Theatre. At the beginning of November, Checkpoint revealed James Kwak's Entertainment Centre hadn't had a warrant of fitness for 435 days because of fire safety issues. 435 days. That was the beginning of November. He's still yet to be fined or prosecuted by Auckland Council, despite the council labelling him frustrating and the least responsive business owner in Auckland. Tonight we can reveal his building still does not have a warrant of fitness, so that's 478 days now, operating without one. Checkpoint understands delays were in part caused by a struggle to get private fire compliance companies to do work on the building. Argus and First Fire, two of Auckland's biggest, both won't go in part because of historical payment problems. And as Zach Fleming explains, it's not just money that's been lost.
Skyworld Indoor Entertainment. These signs decorate the outside of the 6-storey complex, making sure you know where you are. Made in April 2015, they cost more than $50,000, but they still haven't been fully paid for.
Got paid in September 2015, part of it. Then we got paid a little bit in March 2016, then a little bit in June 2017. And the June 2017 payment was after we went to court. And that's the one that's still currently being fought about.
So 2.5 years and you still haven't been paid in full?
Yeah, that's right.
Neil Shah, Managing Director of Riley Signs, one of New Zealand's leading signwriting companies. They made the giant neon sign for the former Vector Arena. I asked him to rank his contract with James Kwak against every client he's had since he joined Riley in 2004.
Right at the very, very bottom.
So this is the worst client you've ever had in 13 years?
Yes.
Skyworld's capital value is $42 million. Inside is a bowling alley, mini-golf, games arcade, mirror maze, food court and multiple movie theatres. More than 2 million people visit each year. Checkpoint knows of at least 6 companies who have gone to court to try and get paid for work done on Skyworld. One dispute alone was worth more than $100,000. Calvin Clapperton worked as a project manager for James Kwak for a year. He's helped 3 companies try and recover disputed bills.
It's commonly known that he doesn't pay his bills.
Checkpoint asked Mr. Kwak through his representative for the total dollar value of bills being disputed. They did not respond.
With James, you get the feeling that he's got the cash. It's just you have to be the squeakiest wheel to get paid, which is, I think, my understanding of how you get paid.
Would you do work for him again?
No.
A fire compliance contractor currently helping James Quack get Skyworld a warrant of fitness demanded payment up front before doing any work. Today is the 478th day Skyworld has been open without a warrant of fitness. Auckland Council has described James Quack as disengaged and unresponsive, but it still can't say whether it wants to prosecute him. It's instead given him until the end of today to achieve full compliance with Skyworld. But it can't say what will happen if he fails to meet that deadline, as he's done with every deadline for the past year. A representative of Mr Quack said in a statement the reason Riley Signs hasn't been paid in full is because their work was flawed and there were defects which have not been repaired, and that Mr Shah did not show up to a meeting to resolve the matter face to face. Neil Shah says the work was not defective. The statement continued that Mr Quack makes continuous contributions to society and makes payments as per contractual agreements. Checkpoint has tried to contact James Quack more than a dozen times, both for this story and for our other stories about Skyworld. We've sent him emails directly, we've left messages with his staff, both in person and over the phone. We've even sent a letter to his home in Albany, but he has never replied. We even ran into him in person once, but he pretended to be somebody else.
Why you ask me?
I'm Zach Fleming from Radio New Zealand, is it?
I have James. No? No? I'm just in a visiting there.
Then, earlier this week, through a representative, he finally agreed to an interview. But the morning of, that representative emailed revoking that offer, saying James Quack was too busy, though he did have enough time to send me a personally signed Christmas card. There are people that will never be paid, because they can't be. Simon Squire's friend and business partner Bryce died in March last year.
He was a nice guy, a really nice guy, and yeah, so we're good friends.
The pair did interior shop fit-outs together for 5 years. Bryce designed, Simon built.
Early November, late October, early November, he said to me that there was this IMAX job and that it was going to be slowly redeveloped the whole food court area. And I thought that's a good opportunity to get your name out there and be visible.
Simon says James Quack was a really tricky client. A March 4th, 2016 letter from lawyers acting for Bryce's company, Iconoclast Concepts, to J&J Holdings, James Quack's company, alleged a failure to pay contractors meant it was difficult to get them back on site.
The reason why the whole project wasn't going ahead was the non-payment on part of the J&J management that was not paying the contractors, the flooring guy or the ceiling guys or the building work or the extractor system. All that was delaying the whole process, and they were blaming it all fair square on Bryce, but the payments weren't coming through, and so nobody was finishing their job.
In a statement, James Quack's representative disputed that, saying it was Bryce who failed to carry out the works he was hired to do as a project manager, causing substantial losses. The disputed amount Bryce was asking for was $5,328.
Yeah, that's how ridiculous, how much absurd it is. I mean, Bryce was stressing out big time, and he said to me in those days, he said, I wish I never took on this contract.
A letter by Bryce's doctor, William Rayneck, dated March the 3rd, the day before the lawyer's letter, reads,
This is to confirm that I have been treating Bryce since October 2016 for anxiety disorder brought on by work-related stress. His condition has gradually deteriorated over the ensuing months, and he is now finding it increasingly difficult to deal with the demands and responsibilities of his position as a project manager. I have advised him to terminate his contract due to the detrimental effect it is having on his health. Yours sincerely, Dr. William Rayneck.
Dr. Rayneck wouldn't comment for this story, but he confirmed to Checkpoint he wrote that letter. Bryce didn't heed his advice. He died later that month. Bryce's ex-wife, Sue, emailed Mr. Quack's lawyer 4 months later in July 2016 to ask what was happening with the outstanding bill. Mr. Quack's lawyer never replied. Simon Squire says he also tried to chase money from James Quack.
I couldn't get hold of him. He's a ghost. I waited outside his house for hours on end, in front of his office at the 6th floor in a turret, as it seems like. You can't see him. You can't find him.
So he gave up. He says a big reason is because he believes New Zealand's laws are too lax. After spending more than 20 years working in Italy, he says in New Zealand it's comparatively too hard to chase unpaid contracts.
The smart guys, the shrewd guys that come from a tough environment are a lot smarter than us because we haven't grown up in a tough environment. So they come from a reality where you have to be like that in order to survive. And I think that is the main problem.
In a statement, a spokesperson for Mr. Quack said Mr. Squire didn't use the right type of finish on a piece of furniture, so 10% of the bill was withheld. Neil Shah is close to giving up. He says he's spent at least 60 hours chasing money from James Quack.
This is the thing. It is now on my too hard list, right? It's almost, there's other money that's easier to get, so I put it off indefinitely, which is usually what happens with clients like this.
He says he's currently considering his legal options.
Because it shouldn't be this way. When you do work, normally we always get paid.
For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
So what does Auckland Council say in response to Zach's story? Well, it was unable to say whether or not James Quack has met its deadline of today to get Sky World fully compliant. We asked if it's happy with penalties given to building owners. Director of Regulatory Services Penny Purrett sent us a statement saying Auckland Council would welcome penalties in these instances being increased with the aim of encouraging building owners to comply with their responsibilities under the Building Act. Ultimately, this is out of our hands, and one of the reasons why we always seek to resolve these matters outside of the court process. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Coming up, State Highway 1 between Kaikoura and Picton opens for the first time in over a year, and a Christchurch babysitter is sentenced to 5 years in jail for the manslaughter of a baby in her care. We would love your feedback on the Royal New Zealand Ballet, on Sky World, the building, or on anything we are covering. Text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. You can follow us, watch us on Facebook, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. 27 minutes to 6. Here's the headlines with Katrina.
The Royal New Zealand Ballet Company has announced an independent review of its employment processes. It relates to media reports of an exodus of New Zealand dancers from the company. A board member, Isaac Hikaka, told Checkpoint the review will focus on processes for dealing with complaints by employees. A resident of Rakutara, north of Kaikoura, says the reopening of State Highway 1 through the town is wonderful for the community. Ngai Aotearoa was trapped in Rakutara when the devastating 7.8 magnitude earthquake a year ago wrecked the road, and says the town has suffered significantly. Kiwi Rail, meanwhile, says the reopening of the South Island's main transport corridor is an important step towards restoring key freight transport links between Auckland and Christchurch. The number of people with mumps in Auckland has topped 1,000, with experts saying the outbreak now can't be contained without more vaccinations. A senior lecturer in vaccinology at Auckland University, Helen Pertussis-Harris, says once it reaches a certain threshold, the disease will keep spreading until it runs out of susceptible people. Most of those contracting mumps are from the so-called lost generation, people aged 11 to 29 with low vaccination rates. A 5-year inquiry into sexual abuse in Australia has handed over its final report. The Royal Commission has heard harrowing testimony from thousands of survivors. It identified abuse at more than 4,000 institutions, including religious organisations, sporting clubs, foster homes and the military. The Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull says the Commission has exposed a national tragedy, and he thanked those survivors who told their stories. All lanes are open northbound on Auckland's southern motorway after a serious crash near Takanini closed all but one lane earlier. The traffic was backed up, but the Transport Agency says it's improving. It's 25 to 6 and I'll be back at 6 o'clock.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Jonathan Mitchell, our final business news for the year. Jono, and you're going to look at the run manufacturing's had this year. Fairly solid, is it?
That's right. This is proving to be another strong indicator for the economy, John. We've had the BNZ Business New Zealand Performance of Manufacturing Index. An index I've talked about on the program before shows data for November rose to 57.7. Now, that's strong, particularly given that a reading over 50 indicates expansion. But what's more important is the sub-indices underneath the main index. Shows production remains high, employment is good, and new orders are holding up reasonably well. Now, manufacturing is set to play quite an important part of next week's economic growth numbers for the September quarter. Previewed those earlier in the week, reading around 0.5, 0.7%. Some analysts are picking. So manufacturing is important. It's showing that the second half of the year has been particularly strong for this. And it really goes against the mood of some recent business surveys, which have been a bit negative since the general election. So it shows manufacturing, the activity itself, is keeping pace.
Thanks, Jono. How did the markets end the week?
Another record, John, up 37 points to 8,361. Kiwi dollar 70 US cents, 91.3 Australian. And all that's left to say is have a good Christmas.
You too. It's been a real pleasure working with you this year, Jonathan Mitchell, one of our 3 excellent business reporter teams. Have a great Christmas yourself, Johnny. It is 23 minutes to 6 and let's head south, unless you live in the south, in which case we'll be heading north. Today, South Island motorists were able to drive the route between Kaikoura and Picton for the first time in over a year. State Highway 1 was devastated by a 7.8 magnitude earthquake last November, which shattered the South Island's main transport corridor. But $500 million later, the road has finally reopened, pretty much exactly on schedule. Logan Church was there when the sign changed from road closed to road open.
1 year, 1 month and 1 day after State Highway 1 was forced shut, today it's finally reopened. Cars, camper vans, boats and trucks all flocked to the road as the stop sign turned green this afternoon. One of the first motorists to drive the route was Gerald Breeze.
I organised this trip so I was going home on the 15th. I've been following it on Facebook and I just wanted to see it, and this miraculous, done so quickly job, I want to see it.
Today is a day of celebration for the town, as its main source of business, tourism, dried up quickly after the earthquake. Penny Bett owns Gecko Gear, and she hopes today's opening will encourage tourists back to the seaside town.
So I think it's going to make a huge difference. It's just people will be able to get in here that haven't been able to get here. It should bring in lots and lots of people. It's hard to know. It's kind of, I started getting really excited about it a couple of days ago. It's finally here. It's finally here.
Penny says many of the town's businesses have had a tough year and many have struggled to keep their doors open.
It changed our life instantly. I'd just been overseas and done a great big shop, and all my stock arrived on the day of the quake into Christchurch. So there was just no customers. There was nobody to buy all the stock and huge debts, and it turned our lives upside down.
Today is also a special day for Ngaio Teoa, who found herself trapped in Lakotara after the earthquake. She says much of the Kaikoura coastline is completely different to what it was before the earthquake.
People are going to be driving along the road today. They won't know about all the mud and the rain and the slips that came down and we couldn't get in or out of to our place sometimes. They'll just see a brand new highway today, and that's fantastic. Everybody's been waiting for that to happen all year, and now it's open. It's so great for the town, just lifting the spirits of everybody here today.
From the sky, the sheer scale of the rebuild efforts becomes obvious. Massive cuts in the cliff face are now the only reminder of the 1 million cubic metres of rock that crashed onto the road. Flying around Oho Point, the old road, which still clings to the cliff face, now looks down on a highway that's been built on the seabed that rose during the earthquake. More than 7,000 concrete blocks, 5 tonnes each, form massive seawalls to hold back the ocean. Locals say they are amazed the road has opened so quickly.
You know, we're going to get people from south and north coming through the town, especially the ones from Christchurch that used to come up with their boats and go through to the Sounds. They don't have to do that big long haul.
A lot of people have got family and relations in Blenheim, and Blenheim is only normally an hour and 5 minutes to get away, but you know, for people to go and see their families and friends, it's a big journey.
To me, there's real signs of the community having financial hardship through the lack of tourism, so hopefully now with the road opening they're going to come pouring in and give the business people confidence.
The road is in no way finished, with construction workers coming back after Christmas to keep building up the highway. The road also won't be open at night. But for these motorists, they're just happy Kaikoura is reconnected again from the south and the north. In Kaikoura for Checkpoint, ko Logan Church tēnei.
I just want to say again, I know I've said this before, but Logan Church, one of the brilliant young graduates that RNZ's hired in the last year or two, who shoot, edit and report stories themselves. They are super clever, these youngsters. The American communications regulator voted to repeal rules introduced by President Barack Obama aimed at ensuring a free and open internet. It means service providers will be able to block slow access to or charge more for certain content. And it may usher in a new era of politicisation of the internet with a very corporate bias. The decision announced in Washington is expected to be challenged in the courts robustly. And whatever side you're on, there's a lot riding on this. CNN's Natasha Chen reports.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted.
The Federal Communications Commission Thursday voted along party lines to repeal a 2015 Obama-era net neutrality rule prohibiting internet security providers from prioritizing online content. It was a rule some commissioners said protected consumers.
A soon-to-be toothless FCC is handing the keys to the internet, one of the most remarkable, empowering, enabling inventions of our lifetime, over to a handful of multi-billion-dollar corporations.
And others said was restricting companies from expansion and innovation.
After a 2-year detour, one that has seen investment decline, broadband deployments put on hold, and innovative new offerings shelved, it's great to see the FCC returning to this proven regulatory approach.
But despite opposition from a trade group representing some tech companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google, public demonstrations,
"Don't block my internet!"
and a brief interruption to the meeting due to a security threat.
On advice of security, we need to take a brief recess.
The vote proceeded, with Chairman Ajit Pai saying today's ruling will lead to more competition and innovation.
Americans will still be able to access the websites they want to visit.
But the FCC's decision is unlikely to be the final word, as some in the technology industry have already indicated they are looking to see what legal options they have to challenge the vote.
That is Natasha Chen from Reuters. The parents of a 1-year-old girl who was killed by her babysitter say they will never recover from the pain of losing their child. Alia Ashlyn Chand died in January 2015 after suffering skull fractures and brain bleeding injuries, which the Crown says 21-year-old Shal Al-Pashana Sami inflicted in a moment of frustration. Sami, who had only moved from Fiji to Christchurch a few months before the incident, claimed the baby fell off a couch, but last month a jury found her guilty of manslaughter. Our Christchurch reporter Maya Burry was in court as she was sentenced to 5 years in prison today.
Sami was 18 years old and 5 months pregnant when she was employed by Alia's parents in late 2014 to babysit their daughter. On January 6, 2015, Alia was dropped off at Sami's flat in Linwood as normal, but sometime during the evening she suffered skull fractures, eye and brain bleeding, and bruising on the ears and cheeks. In a victim impact statement, Alia's mother, Anjani Lata, described the grief, anger and heartbreak that the family continues to feel over losing their baby girl.
She left home one morning happy and content, and she never came back home. We lost our beautiful daughter Alia. No parent should ever have to experience watching their child pass away and then have to bury them. The effects of this will never be over for us.
Shail Sami claimed that Alia fell from the couch in a tragic accident, but several medical experts who gave evidence during the trial said her injuries were not compatible with that kind of fall. Anjani Lata said Sami's actions had put her family through unbearable pain, and she still had so many unanswered questions. She described her daughter as a beautiful and happy child who always had a smile on her face.
We haven't been able to move on, and the trial made us have to relive the nightmare all over again. Why was life so cruel to us? We will never find the answer to that.
After the infant sustained the fatal injuries, Sami raced outside the flat seeking help. The baby was then rushed to hospital and put on life support, but she never regained consciousness. Alia's cousin, Kriti Kumar, told the court she hoped one day Sami would be able to tell them exactly what she did to the infant.
We will pray and wait for that day which may bring more closure to our lives. I hope you do realize that your actions has shattered the lives of two families, one being your own.
In her sentencing remarks, Justice Dunningham said Alia's parents were loving and devoted, and she didn't think they could have done anything more to protect their daughter. She said it was not known what prompted Sami to injure Alia or how her injuries were caused.
We do know that Alia was a little unsettled, having been with her family for a period of time over the Christmas break, and she was reported by you to be off her food. Whether it was that factor that led you to be frustrated with Alia and lose your temper, we will never know.
When sentencing Sami, Justice Dunningham said she took into account the defencelessness of the victim and the breach of trust that had occurred, but she also accepted the offending was out of character.
I also accept that at the time of this offending you were only 18, you were 5 months pregnant and in an isolated and foreign environment. I consider these factors significantly mitigate your culpability, and I must be conscious of them when sentencing you.
Sami cried after the 5-year sentence was handed down. She will be deported to Fiji once she is released from jail. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
Gosh, there's a lot of feedback tonight. A lot of it wishing us happy holidays or Christmas or break or whatever you like to say, and we are very grateful for it. Thank you. Likewise, back at you. We really appreciate your company and your kind wishes. People talking about Zach Fleming's investigation into Skyworld on Queen Street in Auckland. Someone saying they're very impressed by it. Yes, Juliet, us too. Why can't council close buildings that fail to achieve safety requirements within reasonable time, such as 3 months? It's unacceptable that an unscrupulous business can just ignore their responsibilities because local government is not given authority to enforce its rules. And Frank, our old mate, Frank, it's lovely to hear from you, Frank. Well, I don't have to pay my bills, says Frank. James Quack doesn't. I didn't know the free market really was free. And somebody describing the trip via State Highway 1 from Picton to Kaikoura and on to Cheviot, or Cheviot as they say there, we are in awe of the work done. There were lots of smiles and waves on the way, and motorists took care on the way as they travel. Well done, guys. Carol from Levin. Yes, indeed, it is an engineering feat to have that road reopened again. Let's turn to cannabis, medicinal cannabis, and suppliers of it are defiant despite a spate of recent arrests saying they'll carry on growing and making their products for the people who need them. At least 5 suppliers dubbed Green Fairies have been arrested in the last 6 months, cutting off hundreds of people who were using their product to relieve chronic pain, the side effects of chemotherapy and other conditions. Kate Newton went looking for the fairies at the bottom of the garden to find out why they continue despite the risk.
I'm scared to death. I am scared to death that I will be arrested. I have a policeman that lives 3 doors down from me, so I don't grow.
Word spreads quickly in the Green Fairy network, and Tracy Wood is fully aware of her fellow suppliers' arrests. She says other compassionate suppliers are having trouble filling the gap the arrests have made.
Each area has a Green Fairy somewhere, and we're all doing what we can, But because of the time of the year, we can only do so much because we all have our own people that we look after.
The government is due to introduce a bill to Parliament next week, which would make medicinal cannabis available to people who are dying or in chronic pain. Another green fairy, Paul, says any change is welcome, but he'll continue doing what he's doing no matter whether the new legislation covers the existing cottage industry.
As far as I'm concerned, the job I'm doing has to be done regardless of the law. But yeah, I get probably more pissed off that it's happening because, you know, the law can use their discretion, well, supposedly so, but they don't seem to be doing it.
The recent arrests haven't put him off, even though he's been busted by the police before.
When they've come, the heart rate hasn't gone up, the sphincter hasn't sphinctered. I just said, oh shit, these guys again.
The reason Paul takes the risk is simple. He has something he believes can help people.
They'll ring up and say, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, you've done. It's a very humbling experience.
The coordinator of Medical Cannabis Awareness NZ, Shane LeBrun, says compassionate suppliers concentrate on growing cannabis strains with high levels of cannabidiol, a chemical that, according to growing evidence, is effective for treating a range of medical conditions. He says many charge a discounted price or only accept koha.
Some of them even give it away for free. And so they're taking quite a lot of risk themselves, the compassionate suppliers or the green fairies. So the patient community views them as heroes. The modern-day Robin Hoods, because they are risking a lot to help people who are just poorly serviced by the legal options.
Nelson lawyer Sue Gray is representing 3 of the people who've been charged: the medicinal cannabis activist Rose Renton, a supplier from Christchurch, and greymouth man John Patrick, who supplied his balm to hundreds of people, including trade unionist Helen Kelly, before she died last year. Ms Gray says there's no question that John Patrick and the other green fairies she's representing are acting altruistically.
He's found a product that helps people, and I think we all feel the same. With knowledge comes responsibility, and if you know that something can provide so much benefit to so many people, it's very difficult to not do it. And so you're torn between the law on the one hand and the ethics on the other hand.
She says very few people are able to afford the handful of legal cannabis products, and the arrests have been a disaster for them.
The green net fairies were just filling this massive gap, but with them pretty much out of action, it's either an open slather for the sort of real black market who are not so altruistic, or people are being forced to go back to opioids and other pharmaceuticals with all the side effects of those.
Ms Gray says with a jury trial still up to a year away, John Patrick is out of action indefinitely. A spokesperson for the Health Minister, David Clark, wouldn't confirm ahead of time whether next week's bill would cover compassionate suppliers. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Kate Newton aho.
7.5 to 6. Last week we brought you the story of Robert Erueti, an Auckland man who'd been living a transient lifestyle ever since he was evicted from his Housing New Zealand home. If you heard this story, you'll remember it. Robert was forced to leave in March last year after tests showed small amounts of methamphetamine traces, tiny amounts. But he was never charged, and both the Ministry of Social Development and Housing New Zealand said there was no proof he was responsible. He was evicted because his name was on the lease. He went on to sleep rough in a boarding house and spent 58 weeks in a motel at a cost of at least $44,000 to the taxpayer, making him New Zealand's longest emergency housing motel tenant.
I kind of felt that this was going to drag on. In my heart, I thought that they would never get her, or they would never help me. And I felt that they had forgotten about me.
Well, Housing Minister Phil Twyford heard that. He came on the program the following night to announce policy changes in response to Robert's story. Michelle Cook, who told us Robert's story, met with Robert and his daughter Casey today as he got the keys to a unit in a Housing New Zealand complex.
I've had an apology from the Housing Minister, and he came to meet me in person, and I really thanked him, and it really touched me, and it sort of like I kind of knew that he would, after this outcome, that he would probably provide me a place. On Monday I got a call from Housing, and they said we could have a property for you, Robert.
The Minister of Housing, Phil Twyford, told Checkpoint last week Robert should never have been evicted from his state house. His daughter Casey, a social worker, says she was surprised he was offered a house within a week of going public and doubted they would have had the same result under the previous government.
It's been overwhelming to know that there are a lot of people in New Zealand that do care about my dad and his story and his situation. It's been really difficult and very hard for myself to support my dad as there have been many policies and barriers that have been upon this process. So I'm just very thankful to Phil Twyford and his team for coming out last week to meet my dad and myself, and really just to know that my dad has somewhere safe to live and somewhere that he can call home, somewhere stable and somewhere where his grandchildren can come and visit. Yeah. Since the eviction, my father has been disconnected as a grandfather and hasn't really had a lot to do with his grandchildren due to his transiency. So I got a phone call the other night from a nephew who said to me, "Auntie, I'm just so happy that Koro's got a home because I'm able to go and visit him." And so he's asked, "Auntie, is it okay if I can take my PlayStation to Koro's?" And even my son, he's overwhelmed by the news. And last night he's rung Koro and he's asked if he could come in the weekend and hang out with Koro. So that's really awesome.
It means a lot to me. It means that I can be safe and I can get on with my health and taking my medication properly. And I could, with a big highlight, like my daughter was saying, cases, I could get on with my grandchildren and have them over for the weekends. And yeah, it's been a big thanks for everyone that was involved in making this happen.
That is Robert Erueti talking to our reporter Michelle Cook, who wrote that story. Quite an extraordinary response to it, and I think more to come because the methamphetamine limit has gone from 0.5 to 1.5 in the testing. There is a sense it may go higher yet. This is trace limits off walls, carpets and that sort of thing. That's something we will look at next year. Lots and lots of feedback coming in tonight. Brian of the beautifully named Ngā Motu said, "Hi John, you should also mention that the rail link was open some time ago, Ri Kai Kaura. Yeah, we covered it at the time, Brian, and it is important to remind people that indeed you can drive or catch the train. It is a wonderful train ride along that coast." People saying I'm so over Richard in this case, but lots of people saying it. I'm so over our backward Conservative government, decriminalise or legalise. Now, that is of course about medical marijuana. People really insistent, Checkpoint listeners pretty insistent on a change around medical marijuana. We received very strong feedback after we interviewed Helen Kelly about how her use of it. She really swore by it. Lots of people wishing us really well. Somebody saying, why John Trimmer? Why isn't he on the board? 60 years experience in the Royal New Zealand Ballet. This from Lisa. Or Lisa McDonald, sorry, Lisa or Lisa, it's the end of the year and I'm buggered. But we really appreciate email. It's long, so I can't read the whole thing. But you say, as a real fan of the ballet, I suspect, a few years ago I could easily put a name to the faces of most of the dancers. These days I can only recognise a few, and it has been very clear that dancer churn in recent years has been high. The idea that it's reasonable that a company the size of the Royal New Zealand Ballet should turn over 12 dancers a year is palpably absurd. That would leave the average tenure a mere 2.5 years. That is no way to have continuity and no way to allow audiences to connect to favourite dancers. Finally, I would like all of the dancers in the Royal New Zealand Ballet to know that they have 100% my support. I wish I could say the same about senior management. Lots of people being in touch with us about the ballet and that interview. If you've just tuned in, it's online. Bonner Martin, hi Bonner, says Bonner loves the program. Thank you. The Auckland City Council are not doing their job. This is in response to Zach's story about Skyworld. They're putting people's lives in jeopardy by not ensuring safety standards are met. I went to the IMAX cinema one day and on leaving the cinema, the exit door we went to was locked. It had a lit exit sign and should have allowed exit from the cinema. I rang the fire service safety officer and reported it to him. The council should close the place immediately until all safety requirements are met. Locked fire exits are not on. My wife and I have been in a hotel during a fire emergency and the fire exits were locked. The US Fire Service took it very seriously indeed. Thank you for your feedback and for your company throughout the past 12 months. Do stick with us. We have half an hour to go this year and we're going to end it with something pretty magic. In radio, we're meant to tease you and keep you hanging on, but let me tell you that it involves the three rather wonderful men from Sole Mio. Yeah, Katrina Batten, you have a bit of a voice. You're a bit of a singer yourself, aren't you, KB?
Well, yeah, but not like them. My goodness, they're fantastic.
Well, they're singing us out tonight. It's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The Royal New Zealand Ballet has decided to carry out an independent review of its complaints processes for employees following media reports of a large turnover among New Zealand dancers. An RNZB board member, Isaac Hikaka, told Checkpoint the review will be led by the former Deputy State Services Commissioner Doug Craig and will be completed by March. Mr Hikaka noted, however, the company's new artistic director, American Patricia Barker, has a lot of support from the dancers.
We have had, only this morning, dancers go in tears, dancers who are currently with the company go in tears to the artistic director because they are concerned about what they see as attacks in the media by the media against the company that they love and love being a part of.
Isaac Hikaka later clarified that Ms Barker is currently overseas and dancers had corresponded with her. About 1,000 vehicles have already travelled along the reopened stretch of State Highway 1 north of Kaikoura. The route was devastated by a 7.8 magnitude earthquake last November, which brought the South Island's main traffic corridor to a halt. Logan Church reports from Kaikoura.
Hundreds of cars, trucks, camper vans and motorbikes have already travelled along the route since its opening this afternoon. A spokesperson for the group behind the rebuild, Triska Forrester, says there were some delays this afternoon around Oho Point, which saw the worst slips during the earthquake. Ms Forrester says that area is still down to one lane and motorists should expect ongoing delays. She said sightseeing motorists should avoid the area during the expected pre-Christmas rush. State Highway 1 north of Kaikoura will be closed at night, with crews returning after the Christmas break to continue work on the road. In Kaikoura, ko Logan Church tēnei.
More than 1,000 people have now contracted mumps in Auckland, and experts say the outbreak now can't be contained without more vaccinations. The latest Auckland Regional Public Health figures show 1,003 people have contracted the disease since it broke out earlier this year. Rowan Quinn reports.
One expert says the disease now has the hallmarks of an epidemic, even though it's still officially classed as an outbreak. Senior lecturer in vaccinology at Auckland University, Helen Pertussis-Harris, says the more people that have the mumps, the faster it travels through the community. She says once the disease reaches a certain threshold, it will keep spreading until it runs out of susceptible people. The only way to cut that number is to vaccinate. Most of those who have been contracting mumps are from the so-called lost generation, people aged 11 to 29 with low vaccination rates. Vaccinations are being offered free in Auckland. I Tāmaki Makoto, ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
8 people were hospitalised after eating drug-laced Christmas cake at a staff smoko in Auckland. The workers at a business in Glenfield were taken to hospital by ambulance after eating the cake on Wednesday. RNZ News understands it was most likely spiked with synthetic cannabis. However, the police will only say it contained poisons. A 58-year-old man has been charged with 9 counts of poisoning. A 5-year inquiry into child sexual abuse in Australia has released its final report, making more than 400 recommendations. The Royal Commission uncovered evidence of sexual abuse within institutions, including churches, schools and sports clubs. It's referred more than 2,500 allegations to authorities. The recommendations include a national office for child safety and making it mandatory for more occupations, including religious ministers, to report abuse. But the Catholic Archbishop Anthony Fisher says the recommendation that the Church not require its ministers to be celibate is not as simple as it seems.
We know very well that institutions who have celibate clergy and institutions that don't have celibate clergy both face this problem. We know very well this happens within families that certainly are not observing celibacy, as well as within institutions that do.
Sydney's Catholic Archbishop Anthony Fisher. A 6-storey entertainment complex in downtown Auckland has been operating for 478 days without a warrant of fitness because of extensive fire safety issues. The owner of the $42 million Sky World building on Queen Street, James Quack, had until today to ensure his building was fully compliant. When he missed an end of October deadline, the Auckland Council labelled him as unresponsive and disengaged, but extended his deadline until today. However, the council is unable to say whether he's met the deadline. A council spokesman has told Checkpoint it would welcome harsher penalties for building owners who fail to meet compliance deadlines, as opposed to the current norm of a discharge without conviction or a small fine. It's 6:05. Sport. England are struggling to keep their grip on the crucial third Ashes test at the Wacker in Perth. The tourists started the morning in a strong position at 305 for 4, with century maker David Malan unbeaten on 110. Stop it. What are you going to...
I just think there should be, every time you say the word Wacker, you should say the word mate off the back. At the Wacker, mate.
At the Wacker, mate. OK, I'll remember that for next time.
It's a new RNZ rule.
Malan and partner Johnny Bairstow initially looked untroubled as Bairstow moved through to his first Ashes century. But the wickets have tumbled late, with Malan and Bairstow dismissed for 140 and 119 respectively, and Australia's bowlers quickly ripping through England's last 6 wickets for 35 runs. England, who are 2-0 down in the 5-test series, have been dismissed for 403, with Australia due to start their first innings shortly. Veteran guard Kirk Penny will mark his 150th appearance for the New Zealand Breakers when he runs out against the Adelaide 36ers in their National Basketball League rematch in Auckland tonight. After surging to an early 9-game winning streak, the Breakers have lost 3 of their last 4 games, conceding 31 fouls when they went down to the 36ers in Adelaide at the weekend. Assistant coach Judd Flavel says the Breakers don't want to give away so many free shots tonight.
A big part of their game is getting to the foul line, getting fast break points, and although we did a good job at containing their fast break, you know, it's just more trying to contain their dribble penetration.
Judd Flavel. Leading Australian netballer Shani Layton has withdrawn from the Diamond squad for next month's quad series as she continues to recover from exhaustion. Layton missed the quad series earlier this year, along with the Constellation Cup games against the Silver Ferns. That's the news.
Coming up, Theodore Dalrymple on the sins of the liberal intelligentsia, Barbara King on whether we can feel comfortable eating something that can experience joy and grief and curiosity. Octopuses, cows, insects are okay, and Kate de Goldie and Laura Croach with their traditional Christmas book lists. Coming up after 8 here on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Whanganui, including Bay of Plenty, the central high country, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Mainly fine but isolated showers, especially inland during afternoons and evenings. Manawatu to Wellington and Wairarapa, fine. Marlborough, Nelson and Canterbury, mainly fine, but showers tomorrow afternoon and evening about the ranges, some of which may be heavy with possible thunderstorms. Bulla and Westland, isolated showers turning to rain about southwestland overnight. Otago and Southland, scattered showers today with possible thunderstorms about Southland and Clutha. Long fine spells tomorrow, but a few showers from afternoon, some of which may be heavy and thundery about inland Otago. For Fiordland, a period of rain, and the Chatham Islands mainly fine. It's 6:08. And you're listening to Checkpoint.
You are. And that was one of the funniest grabs I've ever heard in sport. If you missed it, I suggest just pressing the rewind button and having another go. Thanks, Katrina Batten. Happy Christmas. You're working through, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
You doing Christmas morning?
No,
Right.
but I'm doing Christmas evening.
Right. It's been a pleasure working with you this year.
It has as well with you, John. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You
We'll
have a
see you in
lovely Christmas.
January.
Yes, good.
Thank you. Yeah, on behalf of us all. Cheers, Katrina. Thanks. There are warnings billions of dollars worth of infrastructure and thousands of homes are at risk of sea level rise and severe weather caused by climate change. But a new government report out today shows there's a total lack of coordination in how local councils, businesses and communities will manage the impacts. This is something we've been looking at. Nita Blake-Person reports.
2017 has been a year of extremes. From the raging fires in Christchurch's Port Hills in February, Cyclone Debbie's severe weather which hammered Manawatu and Rangatike in April, flooding in Edgecombe and an unusually dry start to this summer. Today's stocktake report warns there'll be more of that, but New Zealand has no national strategy to deal with it. The Climate Change Minister, James Shaw, wants that to change.
We are already having more severe, flood events and more frequent flood events, storms, droughts, which are more frequent and more severe, and so on. So it is really important that we get ahead of this before it really starts to bite.
The report by a working group of experts says 68,000 buildings are at risk of sea level rise, with a replacement cost of $19 billion. 5 regional airports, 46 kilometres of railway and 1,100 kilometres of roads are also exposed. Mr Shaw says local councils will be at the forefront of plans to deal with the risks.
If we're building new railways or new roads or new subdivisions or apartment buildings or airports, it gives us a decision-making framework to say, well, how do we ensure that we're not pouring billions of dollars into new stuff that we're then going to have to write off only a decade or two down the track.
The President of Local Government New Zealand, Dave Cull, says councils have been crying out for that information for years.
We should be cognizant of the seriousness of the issues confronting us, but there's no point in being daunted. We've got to confront it.
He says the government needs to set up a risk agency for local government around climate change impacts.
We already told the government that we want to work with them in a collaborative way to develop planning and to identify what effects different communities and different councils will have to confront. And then on the basis of that, you can do some planning around your finances, etc.
Environmental Defence Society Chief Executive Gary Taylor says the report is a big wake-up call.
Definitely behind the 8 ball. We've seen a lot of coastal inundation, particularly around Dunedin, for example, which has been unplanned for. We've got a lot of managed retreat from rising sea levels and stormwater surges happening in other parts of the country. This is all pretty uncoordinated.
The government's also released a report on coastal hazards and how councils should deal with them. James Shaw says they make for grim reading, but it's important to have a clear picture of the situation to properly prepare. A government working group will make recommendations early next year on how to be better prepared to live with the damage from climate change. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Nita Blake-Person aho.
Residents in a property on Auckland's North Shore that was hit by a car being pursued by police have described how the walls shook as if there'd been an earthquake. The 2 men in the car who had outstanding warrants for their arrest are now in hospital, one with serious injuries. Our reporter Jessie Chang filed this report from Albany.
Dairy Flat Highway is busy, with cars driving past every few seconds. Just a few metres off it lies a mangled metal fence, a broken electrical box and tyre marks on the grass, all pointing to what residents on the avenue say was a bad crash overnight. A 54-year-old man who lives in the property the car struck says he was woken up about 2 o'clock this morning by a loud bang. He says he heard sirens and went outside to see what was going on.
The car left its engine on the other side of the road. The whole front end of the car is missing. So like somebody just taken the top right up to where the passengers was, all that engine, all the front wheels, everything was just wasn't there. That's why it didn't smash into the house much, because all the inertia was gone. It was just like the shell of the car, that hit here and travelled across the road. I was lucky. I was lucky.
The man says there were half a dozen police officers surrounding the car, and one of the men was badly injured.
I don't know, he was pretty quick. He had chest pains or something. The airbag went off in his face and the seatbelt would have crushed his chest or something.
A neighbour agreed.
I was concerned about the driver and the passenger. Well, one was really into sort of like a shock, and the other was really hurt. But I think the police were there and they were taking care of him, so it's all right.
Michelle Lee, who lives on the floor above, says it felt like a small earthquake.
I heard the car running really fast and then I heard the sirens.
So I looked through the window and I saw police cars and people were just out there, and the house was shaking for like about 3 seconds.
The serious crash unit attended, and the Independent Police Conduct Authority has also been advised. In Auckland, for Checkpoint, call Jesse Changaho.
14 minutes past 6. The Auckland City Mission isn't far away from us here, about 180 metres, and the mission says the demand for food parcels and Christmas presents has never been greater. Before lunch today, the mission had 300 people through its doors. That's before lunch. Sophia Ducker-Jones paid a visit.
City Missioner Chris Farrelly says on average they get about 300 people through the door, but over the past week they've had more than 2,000 people needing their help. He says many people begin lining up at midnight.
To witness the extent of need and poverty in our country is pretty awful. It's something we are aware of because it's what we work with all year, but I think at this time of the year it seems to be concentrated or magnified, and we get hit by it.
He says the families package announced yesterday by the government to provide an extra $75 to low-income families might alleviate some poverty, but says there's a lot of work to do between now and when the package comes into effect in July. Kitty is a single mother of a 9-year-old and a full-time student. She's been coming to the Auckland City Mission for about 4 years and says the family package will help her.
I think it's really good that it is becoming available because there are so many vulnerable children out there that will turn into criminals if they do not have that financial support. So I think it's a really good thing.
Kitty has come in today for some Christmas presents and a food parcel.
Being on the student allowance isn't a lot, so the support that I've gotten from the City Mission this year and last year with Christmas presents and food for my daughter and I has just been so wonderful, and it's so greatly appreciated.
While she studies full-time, she mainly relies on a cash-based income from work as a painter, decorator and gardener, but despite this there are times she doesn't get paid. Kitty was so impressed with the help she received that she and her daughter do the same.
The family support that I have been given from the Auckland City Mission has just been invaluable in terms of just having a kōrero, having a hug. Is there anything you need? I'm also a psychologist, so I work as a volunteer myself with the homeless. My daughter and I go out twice a week. We make baking through cafes when I worked as a chef. We drop off the baking, have a kōrero to a lot of the homeless. We help them with literacy because they don't know and they are illiterate. Not all the homeless are drug addicts. Some of them have just had breakdowns.
That's Kitty, a full-time student, mother, helper of the homeless at the City Mission, collecting a food parcel and Christmas presents this year. Kitty hopes to be working full-time next year and teaching the homeless computer literacy skills. The City Mission says they expect a heavier flow of traffic through the doors right up until the 25th. In Auckland, for Checkpoint, Sophia Ducker-Jones.
Yes, on Hobson Street they were queuing for food. Down in Wellington today, Parliament erupted when MPs weren't allowed to go to their lunch break on time. They were debating the government's families package designed to lift children out of poverty, and they had to keep going. Political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
Some MPs were probably already cranky because the government's families package is being passed under urgency, meaning they have to be at Parliament on a Friday and possibly into the weekend. But when MPs weren't allowed to take their lunch break at 1 p.m. and had to keep debating the bill, it all boiled over. National's Jamie Lee Ross was outraged.
The question is that
Point
the
of
question
order.
be
Point
now
of order.
put. Those of
Point
that
of order.
opinion will say aye, and against say no.
Mr. Ross was spitting tacks.
I have the right to raise a point of order. I am the chief whip for a party that represents 56 seats in this parliament. For you, sir, to refuse to even allow me to raise a point of order is grossly disorderly and disrespectful of members of this House.
Finally, he got to raise his point of order with the chair, Adrian Ruafei.
We have gone past 1 o'clock. It is in the standing orders of this parliament that there is a break for the lunch break. And Mr. Chair, I was trying to raise that point of order to you before you dismissed me and did not hear me.
No, I have accepted the closure motion and the vote will take place.
It was all too much for the ACT leader David Seymour, who got himself an early lunch.
Mr Chair, could I put it to you that you have lost control of the House because of the way you've chaired it, and if you're not going to allow me to speak when I have substantive things to say in response to the Minister's constructive comments on my amendment, then there's no point in being here, and if you're going to expel members for relitigating the point of order, we might as well go anyway.
The member will leave the chamber.
The Speaker, Trevor Mallard, was eventually recalled to the House to try to placate the hangry MPs and heard from Labour's Chris Hipkins.
Once a vote has been commenced, is it in order for a member of the House to scream at the presiding officer through the conduct of the vote?
The member will resume his seat. I did indicate that I had been watching the television and am aware of the behaviour in the House at the time. This matter is a very simple matter. The question of the closure is something which is at the discretion of the chair.
Eventually the MPs went to lunch about 40 minutes late. The dinner break is scheduled for 6 p.m. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
Which means I'll be having dinner now, of course. Thank you, Benedict. A complete rebuild of Otago Museum's Interactive Science Centre has for the first time melded Ngāi Tahu's Māori worldview with traditional science. The $2.5 million Tuhura Science Centre opens tomorrow morning in Dunedin with dozens of new hands-on science stations to play with and a refreshed butterfly house. But it's the infinity room that is grabbing the attention. And Ian Telfer went along for a sneak preview.
So right now we're actually seeing, after the Big Bang, we're seeing the first part of the Ngāi Tahu story, which is the kind of the advent of moisture. You're seeing sheets and sheets and waves of rain going across Aotearoa. So that's what the discussion is at the very end.
Where are we now? What is this?
We're in the infinity room, or the void. This is our first zone, and here we use art to kind of create a really, really beautiful parallel between the Big Bang theory and what is to Ko, to Po and to Ao, the first kind of beginning of the advent of light and nothingness in the Ngāi Tahu creation story.
So we're standing in a room, glass mirrors?
Yes, glass mirrors. We're surrounded by hundreds of little lights, and they put on a fantastic display when we switch it on.
It's just the first room of many in a total overhaul of Otago Museum's 20-year-old science centre. And it demonstrates how the museum's revamps married Māori knowledge, or mātauranga Māori, with conventional scientific thinking. The museum's Māori curator, Rachel Wesley, says melding with biology and environmental science has been easy. But she says the physics of fundamental forces was more of a challenge.
For example, gravity in Te Reo Māori is kumea papa, and kume is a Māori word that is, means to pull and is often used in reference to tides and things. So it's not quite something you can directly correlate with gravity, but you can see parallels between the two.
The butterfly house and tropical forest building's been refreshed too, with new bugs. Eden Gray showed us Australian Goliath stick insects, which can grow up to 25 centimetres long.
Insects and other invertebrates are quite hard to get people excited about, and they're really important for ecosystems and the environments. So to be able to see them on such a gigantic scale and for people to interact with them, it's really exciting.
All this is not cheap to visit, at $45 a family, though you can now buy annual passes. For that, you get to play with more than 40 new interactive science stations, including movie makers, light experiments, speed tests and giant air blowers. A few classes of children were quietly let in this week to road test it all. They weren't very quiet. At the centre's heart is a 7-metre high slide, shaped like a DNA double helix, the building blocks of life. The museum's director, Ian Griffin, says he pushed for it.
And I'm very proud of the fact that I was the first down this thing. It's an amazing experience. And I think it's, hopefully, with the noises you can hear behind me, it bears testament to, the wonder of science, engagement. And hopefully people are going to come here for years to come and enjoy it.
So that leaves just one thing, to try out that slide.
Awesome.
The Tuhura Science Centre will be launched tonight and opens to the public tomorrow morning. No doubt to plenty more excitement from kids big and small. Ki Otago Museum mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Ian Telfer.
And if you weren't watching Ian's wonderful story online, you can see what the new Science Centre is like on our website or Facebook page. Images shot by our other Otago Southland reporter, Timothy Brown. It cost $1 billion and has the first defensive moat to be built in Britain for almost 150 years. The United States has a new embassy in London, a 12-storey glass cube on the banks of the Thames. The BBC's Richard Lister went along for a look.
The new US Embassy in London is said to be the most expensive in the world and almost a decade in the making. Inside, there's a garden of American desert flora. It's all designed to be airy and welcoming, not words usually associated with embassies.
I think this is a country of great dignity, and it birthed the United States. And this building should be not some pop icon, but certainly, a building of great dignity and serenity.
But this embassy is also a fortress. It even has a moat, though they'd prefer we call it a pond. Some of the glass is 6 inches thick, a reminder that an embassy is the only place where one nation intersects with another. For decades, that's been Grosvenor Square. The old embassy's been sold to become a hotel, but it's a place now associated with American triumphs and tragedies.
At Grosvenor Square, police warned to expect trouble waited.
It was where British people repeatedly protested against the Vietnam War.
A huge crowd waited for them at the American embassy,
where well-wishers greeted America's first men on the moon and came to pay their respects after the attacks of 9/11. Now a new building will represent America. The US ambassador says this glass-clad building represents America's global outlook, giving form, he says, to the core democratic values of transparency, openness and equality. What's not clear is whether President Trump will be at the opening next month, though he has been invited. It would be the most controversial visit by any American president, a moving-in present for the ambassador.
Trump is coming when he sets the date for coming. He's been invited and he's accepted, but he hasn't set a date. And for the ribbon cutting of this and taking a look at this embassy, that will be announced when he selects the date.
And of course, the new embassy will outlive this presidency and many more to come.
That report from Richard Lister for the BBC. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Checkpoint for the night and for the year. Next week, Craig McCulloch, one of our political reporters, will present the 5 o'clock report on RNZ between 5 and 6. The following week is Christmas, of course. Checkpoint will be back in mid-January. Now, Checkpoint is a production of RNZ News. We have bureaus in Dunedin, Christchurch, 2 in Wellington, with 1 at Parliament, of course, Hamilton and here in Auckland. We also have reporters in the regions, and their work often brings us stories and voices that aren't always heard in mainstream coverage. We are really grateful to all the reporters who filed for us this year, and to our managers at RNZ and our brilliant soundies and IT people, Jeremy Veal, Jeremy Ansell, Blake Stagpole, Rangi Powick, Sean Wharton and Alex Barron. Our permanent Checkpoint team is 7 people: executive producer Pip Keane, associate producer Catherine Wallbridge, producer Bridget Burke, digital editor Michelle Cook, reporter Zach Fleming and director Kelvin Samuel, with Francis Van Kalk filling in this week. I'm really proud to front the program we make together. Thank you all for listening and for your really wonderful feedback tonight. We're super grateful for it. Have a wonderful summer. We go out tonight with Sole Mio. They popped into the RNZ concert studio this week to perform a few tunes off their new album, A Very Merry Christmas. So here they are, donning their Santa hats, 3 very clever, talented men, and proving why their album has already gone to #1. See you in January. Thank you for being with us.
Take it away, Penny.
Mele-kiliki-maka is the thing to say on a bright Hawaiian Christmas day. That's the island greeting that we send to you from the land where palm trees sway. Here we know that Christmas will be green and bright, the sun to shine by day and all the stars at night. Mele-kiliki-maka is Hawaii's way to say Merry Christmas to you. maka is the thing to say on a bright Hawaiian Christmas day. That's the island greeting that we send to you from the land where palm trees sway. Here we know that Christmas will be green and bright, the sun to shine by day and all the stars at night. Melekiliki maka is Hawaii's way to say Merry Christmas, a very Merry Christmas, to say Merry Christmas to you.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A 58-year-old man in Auckland has been charged with poisoning after 8 people had to be hospitalised when they ate Christmas cake, thought to be spiked with synthetic cannabis. 2 members of the family struck down with suspected botulism after eating wild boar have returned to their home in Putaruru after a month in hospital. Parliament is sitting under urgency as MPs continue to debate the government's $5.5 billion families package. The Royal New Zealand Ballet has announced an independent review of its complaints processes following reports of a large turnover among its dancers. And State Highway 1 north of Kaikoura has finally reopened after more than a year of earthquake repairs. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Country Life this week is visiting Eastern Bay of Plenty farmers whose properties were severely flooded in early April. The stress and trauma remains for many 8 months on.
I'm tired, but, I still love farming.
What do you think when you hear heavy rain?
It's definitely panic. Think, oh my God, is this going to be half an hour, or in 12 hours' time, what are we going to be facing?
It's been absolutely sopping wet until middle of November.
Trying times. Country Life Friday night at 9, Saturday morning at 7 on RNZ National.
Thanks, Carol. This is Trending Now, our feature highlighting the stories you've been sharing via digital and social media. And as you heard in the headlines, Parliament has gone into urgency, so we'll have a summary of what's been going on in the